Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure and an honor as chairman of the Portuguese Association for Nature, affiliate of WWF, to start this webinar, which is the first of a series of 3 webinars about the Portuguese presidency of the European Union. And this webinar is specifically very timely because it starts in the eve of the European climate law discussion, and that's why we are gathering a group of experts, key speakers that will be helping us in debating the European climate law and the Portuguese presidency. The speakers will be presented by our Director of Conservation and Policies, Catarina Grillo. Before we start these presentations and discussion, we would like also to show you a small video by the Portuguese Minister of Environment, Matos Fernandes, that will set the stage for the discussion. Thank you.
Não temos som, Rita.
Estruturamos a nossa presidência em 5 domínios que refletem os grandes eixos de intervenção do Pacto Ecológico Europeu: a ação climática, a economia circular, a poluição zero e os químicos, a biodiversidade e dossiês transversais. Na ação climática, prosseguiremos as negociações com o Parlamento Europeu e com a Comissão, tendo em vista alcançar aquela que é uma das nossas prioridades, um acordo a curto prazo quanto à lei do clima, enquanto contributo fundamental para alcançar a neutralidade climática até 2050. As alterações climáticas são hoje uma realidade e motivo de preocupação para Portugal e toda a Europa, motivo pelo qual pretendemos promover um debate alargado sobre a estratégia europeia para a adaptação às alterações climáticas, que culmine com a adoção de conclusões do Conselho sobre esta matéria. É fundamental aumentar a circularidade na Europa. Desta forma, procuraremos levar a negociação do regulamento para as baterias e resíduos de baterias tão longe quanto possível, atendendo também ao contributo determinante desta proposta para a transição climática. A estratégia para a sustentabilidade dos produtos químicos e o futuro plano de ação para a poluição zero consubstanciam objetivos ambiciosos para a redução da poluição, pelo que iremos promover o debate político sobre estas matérias ao nível do Conselho. Queremos ajudar a concretizar a ambição da União Europeia enquanto líder global em matéria de proteção e conservação da biodiversidade. A presidência portuguesa está empenhada nos trabalhos preparatórios da 15ª COP da Convenção para a Biodiversidade. Quanto aos dossiês transversais, pretendemos alcançar uma orientação geral relativamente ao 8º Programa de Ação para o Ambiente e, por fim, a apresentação do semestre europeu na nossa presidência terá particular relevo no atual contexto da pandemia e com a aprovação do novo quadro financeiro plurianual.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Francisco, for the brief introduction. Just a quick note for everybody. This event is being broadcasted live on our Facebook page and will be made available on YouTube after the session ends. If the viewers have any questions, feel free to send them by email to us or through Facebook messaging. Now let's start this debate on how the Portuguese presidency can steer the European environmental agenda, especially on climate. Let me begin by introducing our 5 guests at this virtual roundtable, who I thank again for accepting our invitation. The Portuguese government is hereby represented by Alexandra Carvalho, Secretary General of the Ministry of Environment and Climate Action. Thank you in behalf of WWF for participating in our webinar, Alexandra. We are also honored to have Paulo Silva Lemos, former Portuguese Secretary of State for the Environment and currently Policy Officer at the European Commission's DG Environment. João Moraes Sarmento, a well-known name for those working in the Brussels offices. João is one of the main technical advisors for environment in the Portuguese representation at the EU. I also welcome Esther Azim, Director of WWF's European Policy Office, to this webinar. Thank you for accepting our invitation, Esther. And finally, also at this roundtable, Angela Morgado, the CEO of the WWF, ANP WWF, who represents WWF in Portugal, an organization that has been carrying out for several years recognized work in the field of environmental advocacy. Before I start addressing questions to each of you, I would like, for those who are watching us and who do not know your work, if you could summarize it for us for no more than 1 minute, highlighting the role that you play in your respective offices. I would start with Alexandra Carvalho, Secretary General of the Ministry of Environment and Climate Action. Thank you, Alexandra. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you as well for inviting us to be here. Thank you to ANP and WWF. It's a really timely debate because we are actually now in the 3rd month of our presidency and works are going smoothly. And it's important to debate and to share what we're doing. Concerning myself, well, I'm Secretary General of Ministry for Environment and Climate Action for the past 6 years. Under my competences, under the competences of the Secretary General are the international relations. We coordinate the participation of the ministry in the several fora, multilateral and European. Apart from other job, this is in that capacity that I'm here as coordination for international relations. So thank you very much again.
Thank you, Alexandra. Paulo Silva Lemos from DG Environment of the European Commission, if you may.
Hello, and thank you for the invitation. I work in DG Environment in the Circular Economy unit. I am dealing with plastics, plastic strategy, single-use plastics and microplastics, but also eco-design, and in eco-design, the digital part, in particular, the product passport. Thank you.
Thank you. João Moraes Sarmento, I'll give you the floor, please.
Good morning, and thank you also for the invitation. I'm very honored to be here. As you've said, I'm working at the Portuguese Permanent Representation and more particularly following the files on climate and biodiversity as well. So these are the 2 areas where I've developed work at this point, Catarina. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Esther, the floor is yours as well.
Bom dia, obrigada, Catarina. My name is Esther Azim. I'm the director of the WWF European Policy Office based on Brussels, so working from home. Our role is to influence EU policies on environment, climate, biodiversity, and many other areas WWF does work globally and in Europe. And we do so working together with our colleagues in the national offices like the ANP WWF Portugal, but also across many other European Union countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. And Angela, last but not least, can you elaborate a bit on the ANP WWF's mission here in Portugal?
Sure, Catarina. Good morning to all. Thanks for accepting our invitation. Allow me a special good morning to all the women because today it's the International Women's Day. So I'm the Executive Director of WWF in Portugal, of Associação Natureza Portugal, that works in association with WWF. So it's a Portuguese NGO that was created by the end of 2017 to continue the work that WWF was already doing in the context of the Mediterranean program. So our aim is to preserve and conserve the natural values in Portugal. We work in collaboration with WWF. Our program is 100% aligned with the WWF program, and we work mainly in 4 practices in Portugal. So forests, that for us includes food and species, oceans, including sustainable fisheries, and water, and a bit on climate and energy. Thank you.
Thank you all. Now I'm going to start with the first round of questions. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, both our guests and everybody watching us live on Facebook. And my first question will be to Alexandra Carvalho. Alexandra, from Portugal's point of view, I would ask, how is the Portuguese presidency agenda for environment and climate action progressing? And what is expected in the coming weeks as highlights of the agenda of the upcoming environmental councils?
Thank you for the question. So as you know, as we all know, Portugal took over the presidency of the Council at a time when Europe is still dealing with the pandemic and its social and economic consequences. So the challenges we face are clear, but we also are aware that this is an essential moment for Europe's recovery. Realizing that the European Green Deal is essential for the European economy to move forward on the path of recovery and growth and preparing for the future, including digital and green transition and resilience building. So our commitment to sustainability has to have this double dividend of enabling us to achieve our climate and environmental objectives, but also promote the development of our economy and ensuring a fair and inclusive society. Our first priority, our main priority, and our focus is very much so in that, and I think João can also give us some detail on this, is the negotiation for European climate law. We wanted to get it approved and adopted in the first half of this year, and nothing, as the minister said before, we're not going to, it's not, I mean, we cannot fail on this, because the rest of the world wouldn't understand if we're not now quick. We need to show our ambition, we need to lead by the example again. So Europe is very much, we as presidency of the council are very much focused on that, and I think, and all our efforts are on that. So this is our main goal, and the next, as you know, the negotiations will be going on. The next trilogue with the European Parliament, it's the 4th trilogue, is going to be on next Friday, on the 12th of March. The elements on which the Parliament and the Council positions are convergent are identified, and we still need the negotiations to overcome some differences. So very much so, I will see that the next weeks are going to be crucial, and we hope to succeed on this. But there is more. The presidency is not only European climate law, is also the Council conclusions on the European chemical strategy for sustainability towards a toxic-free environment. And this is a very important dossier, and which will be adopted in the next days. And also the decision on the 8th Environment Action Programme, establishing the monitoring framework of the European Green Deal, is also expected to be approved this month. Furthermore, we are discussing the proposal for a regulation concerning batteries and waste batteries. And this is a very important dossier, specifically in promoting the circular economy, in order to seek political guidance on the way forward on the negotiation and the main priorities for member states. There will be a policy debate at the Council, on the Environment Council, on the 18th of March, and it's our aim to try and achieve, after this debate, a general approach on the June Environment Council. Last but not least, we have the presentation of the European semester during our presidency that will have relevance during the current context of pandemic, and together with the approval of the new multi-annual financial framework. We will promote an exchange of views regarding the European semester and the role of the Recovery and Resilience Facility at the Council on the 18th of March. So this is basically our focus. This is in European terms, our focus and the focus of all the member states as well. And I will share no more up to now.
Thank you, Alexandra, for that overview, what we can expect in the coming weeks on the Portuguese presidency regarding environmental matters, and particularly the European climate law. Paulo, you have played an active role in the development of the European Green Deal, specifically the action plan for the circular economy. What impact do we expect this plan to have on European climate goals? And what does the Commission expect from the Portuguese presidency in this regard?
Thank you very much. Indeed, more and more people are aware of the important contribution that circular economy can bring to reducing emissions and for us to achieve the targets of the Paris Agreement. Indeed, there are recent studies that say that this gap, the famous gap of emissions that exists between what was promised by the states that signed the Paris Agreement and the reductions that we need to achieve the 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees, this gap exists, and the circular economy can contribute for the reduction of this gap. How? Because normally when we think about policies to address climate change, we think in renewables, energy efficiency, and reducing emissions. But what about if we don't need to produce these products at all, or that we reduce the demand for the products in the market? And that's precisely what the circular economy tries to do, because we know that the extraction of resources, only the extraction of resources, is responsible for 50% of the CO2 emissions and 80% of biodiversity. Mobile phones, for instance, or smartphones, in Europe, they last more or less 3 years. Their lifespan is 3 years. And there are studies that calculate that if we prolong at least 1 year in the lifespan of a smartphone, we could achieve the reduction of the emissions compared with taking 2 million cars from the roads annually. The same applies to recycling. If we recycle 1 million tons of plastic, is the equivalent of taking from the streets 1 million cars. So that's why the Circular Economy Action Plan puts the focus, and the flagship of the Circular Economy Action Plan is the Sustainable Product Initiative. It's an initiative that we are already preparing. Unfortunately, we will not present it in time for the Portuguese presidency, but it is an initiative that tries to focus on the possibility to repair, to remanufacture, and to recycle and to reuse the products, and with this to increase their lifespan. So people will use more time the products and will reduce the need for new products in the market. At the same time, we are also promoting new business models, like, for instance, sharing products, or like the use instead of ownership. This is the basic of the Sustainable Product Initiative that we hope to present at the end of this year, and that we hope that will make a shift in the mentality of companies and also citizens in order for us to have longer use of the products, or, for instance, not buying the products, but using the products instead for a short period and then throw them away. Well, the Circular Economy Action Plan has much more actions. One of the actions is already being addressed during the Portuguese presidency. That is, batteries was considered one of the areas that should be addressed because, as it was said, it's important for the circular economy, especially for the electrical mobility. And in terms of the Portuguese contribution, we know that Portugal has a very good tradition in terms of climate, in terms of renewables, but also in terms of circular economy. For instance, we are trying to promote that the member states will include in their plans, their climate plans, the modulation on the impact of circular economy, meaning the contribution of circular economy to achieve the results of these reductions needed for the member states. Portugal is one of the few member states that use this modulation already, and we are trying to give Portugal as an example for other member states to also use this kind of modulation, because we believe that the contribution of circular economy is very important to achieve these reductions. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulo. Esther, you have heard Alexandra Carvalho from the Portuguese government and now Paulo from the Commission. I believe that much of what has been said is not exactly news to you, but I think it is important for those who are attending this event. It's been over 2 months since the Portuguese presidency began. What is your assessment so far? And I would also ask you to make a review of what were the objectives met by the German presidency before the Portuguese, and what has fallen upon the Portuguese presidency, and what has been the response so far?
Thank you, Katarina, and thanks also for organizing a really gender-balanced event and discussion on the 8th of March. It's greatly appreciated. If I may allow to start with a comparison, my kids just got their school grades, this week. So if we look at the German presidency, they were given the mandate to broker an agreement in the European Council on the 2030 climate target, and to reflect this outcome in the Council negotiation position on the climate law. So if I looked at the school grades, I would say the German presidency exceeded the expectations, but could have done better. So if I look now at Portugal, and again, with all due respects, I look through this lens of the school grades, I would say improvement is still needed, but we are confident that we will get a good deal, because as Alessandra Carvalho said, and the minister, getting this climate law approved is the central piece of the Portuguese presidency ambitions, at least on climate. And as I said, our impression is that a deal doesn't look anywhere close right now, but maybe we'll get more insights throughout the conversations. We know, at least as WWF, we believe that the current position of the European Parliament is more progressive, more science aligned, and we hope that in the coming days that this event is really timely and critical. Both the presidency and the Parliament will get closer in order to agree on a climate law that is science-based, transparent, and effective. And just to conclude in this first intervention, the science-based position that I keep mentioning, especially on the 2030 climate target. I think it's no news to everyone that we are really observing the warmest, years ever in the last 20 years, and very recently, still last year, 2020. And currently, we're on a path to reach a global warming of 3 degrees. So if we really think, about what the science is telling us, we in WWF, we are still advocating for reaching climate neutrality much earlier in 2040, and therefore reducing our emissions by 65 compared to the reference level, which is the 90s. And this is the target which the United Kingdom has adopted, and the European Parliament is also closing with the proposal of a 60%. So we really hope that we will listen to the science and we'll get to a compromise that, as I said before, is science-based, transparent, and effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. João, this consideration from Esther, and I would say also our own here with ANPWWF in Portugal, are something we have also been hearing with more intensity in the last 2 months with the further developments on the negotiations and trilogues. For those who are not aware, the trilogues are the negotiations between the European Council, the European Parliament, and the Commission. And I believe it must not be easy to be in the position of negotiator. You and your team have been directly involved in the negotiations on the European climate law, and there's a trilogue meeting on the 12th. What are the main challenges you foresee in reaching an agreement on the European climate law?
Well, thank you, Katarina, for your question. At this point, it's about bridging positions and trying to find a common ground where we can agree to the climate law and its several elements. Our work at this point in the Portuguese presidency, and it has been quite an intensive work, has been to somehow broaden the scope of elements that are under negotiation under the climate law. As you know, the Commission came up, adopted a regulation for the climate law. We had a general approach that was a partial one in October, and then a final general approach in December, after the European Council gave its guidance on the Fit for 55 package. But the substantive work has actually started after that. We engaged with Parliament, first of all, looking into the elements where we were closer. In the climate law, elements such as adaptation was one of them. And then we are moving up progressively in complexity and the complexity of issues. The Council and the initial proposal that was adopted by the Commission had no provisions on the role of science. They had no provisions on an approach to a GHG budget. They had no provisions on sectoral roadmaps. And so we are in the Portuguese presidency developing this work and forming a council position on some of these elements. And this is what we have done in the 2 months of the presidency, and most notably on these 3 elements in the last month. We have formed a position from the council, and we are presenting it to the Parliament, and we are going to discuss it. So this is another step, once again, to try to bridge the differences between the co-legislators and trying to find an agreement in the climate law. But it has been hard work, I can tell you.
Thank you, João. Angela, in this first round, there has been a lot of talk naturally about European climate law, possibly because it is not only one of the most important pieces of environmental legislation for Europe since its creation, but also because tough negotiations are expected between the European Council and the Parliament. An European climate law that would probably establish a 55% reduction in emissions by 2030. Do you think it will still be a good law, or do you think Portugal and the other member states should be able to do more?
Again, I know that there is a kind of a narrative that in particular, I think here in the Portuguese presidency, that the NGOs have taken a pro-parliamentary position advocating a 60% reduction of the emissions and that this alignment has been damaging the progress of negotiations with the Council. So I think this narrative supports that WWF and other NGOs are doing is motivating Parliament to impose a target which is not feasible for the Council. But I must say that this has to be made very clear that NGOs have not aligned themselves with the Parliament against the Council. It's not that. It's just as simple as that. When the majority of entities advocate for something, maybe we should hear them. Maybe it's because it's important. Maybe the concessions may have to come from the Council. To be clear, what NGOs are saying is that a 60% reduction by 2030 is what we need. It would be really what we need to ensure that we can achieve neutrality by 2050. I think we should not have doubts on this. A net target of 55 could mean cuts in emissions of as little as 50.5. So that is far too low, that what we are achieving. So we want, I think, we want that the Council hears the Europeans. It must have the courage to adopt a more ambitious target now. In the last Eurobarometer on climate, more than 9 in 10 respondents said 9 in 10 agreed that the greenhouse gas emissions should be reduced to a minimum. So I think the Council has to hear civil society, the citizens in Europe. So I think the key priority is to make this EU the first climate neutral continent in 2050, aligned with the Green Deal. If we set the 55% target now, we cannot have the slightest doubt that maybe in these 9 years we will be discussing again adjustments, and that maybe we were not as ambitious as we could be. So I think it's the time to be ambitious is now. It's not in 5 or 6 years when we have to adapt the target. So that's it. And as my colleague Esther also said, maybe we have to show some ambition in Portugal, in other member states. And WWF is pointing out that we should think about 2040 and not 2050 for the reaching neutrality in terms of carbon. So that's my first set of points to discuss here.
Thank you, Angela. Alexandra, we'll start with the second round of questions. In the meantime, just to give you the heads up that some questions are coming from our audience. I'll try to fit some into our conversation after the second round. Alexandra, the adaptation strategy was recently adopted by the Commission, and we hear that it will be presented at the next Council meeting. What kind of effect will such a strategy have on the quality of life of Europeans in the future? What do you expect from it?
Thank you, Katarina, for the question. Just a little bit on the previous question, just to wrap up a bit. Well, ambition is there. Ambition is there, but as you know, and I have to say this, Portugal is now acting as presidency of 28 member states. And as we know, some are more ambitious than others. And we have to be, and we are at this moment, the honest broker. So I think there is a lot of work that we need to do together. And I think, and very much so, I think now the work is to be done with the European Parliament, and we're doing it. And as João explained, it's quite difficult work. And there is going to be a moment where we're going to have to come together and just do it together. But there's 28 member states, so let's see what we can. If ambition has to be in all of them. Anyway, about adaptation, yes, the Commission presented the new strategy for on adaptation to climate change on the last month. Adaptation is one of the main priorities of the Portuguese presidency. It's going to be the central theme of the informal council of environment and energy will take place in end of April. And adaptation is as a country for Europe is crucial, and for Portugal is even more, is very, very important, because as we know, we're suffering the effects from climate change for a long time now through Europe and in Portugal as well. So it is actually very timely that we can discuss this on the next council. We're going to have a debate. The presentation of the strategy is going to be formally in the next council, and then we're going to have a debate on the informal council, and we aim to have some conclusions on the June Council of Ministers. There is a sense of, again, the adaptation here is another packet of this ambition. Actually, the coordinated action towards adaptation and climate change is key to solve many of the and to address the increasing impacts of climate change. So I think we have a very good strategy presented by the Commission. You know, to make adaptation smarter, to make adaptation more systemic, to make adaptation across the board. I think these are the three main elements, and we have good grounds to work together, and that's what we're going to do on the next few months. Again, it's an excellent opportunity to exchange at several levels, and even to bridge across the civil society as well, And we are very open to do that as well. The informal council is going to be, we wanted a moment of where we bring also NGOs, as it normally happens in informal councils, to have a good discussion and then to prepare a good set of conclusions where ambition has to be there and has to be the main focus. Ambitions and urgent, effective action, all of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra, and glad to hear that the informal council will count with NGOs as well. Paulo, you were one of the key actors in charge of the Single-Use Plastic Directive, and recently the Portuguese Minister of the Environment reinforced the need for a global agreement on plastics. What can the European Union do to lead a global agreement on plastics?
Thank you. Well, I don't have the pretension to say that it was the European Union that put plastics on the agenda, but surely we show how to address the problem. Because since we published the plastic strategy in 2018, that was recognized by the international institutions and by other countries as indeed a landmark, many other countries are following suit in doing their own strategies. Being Australia to address plastic pollution. As you know, we identified in the plastic strategy that one of the main issues and problems was single-use plastics, because they are 50% of the pollution in our coasts are single-use plastics, and then fishing gear is 27. We approved the directive on single-use plastics, and a lot of countries also follow suit, including India, China, Canada, big countries and big polluters also. Concerning the global agreement on plastics, indeed, the European Union is working with a growing number of member states that includes not only Europeans, but from all over the world, in order to promote the global agreement on plastics as a solution to address this issue. Because, as you know, the value chains of plastic are all over the world, and the pollution of plastics came mostly from, not from Europe, but from Asia, and we have to work together to address the issue, and this work is being done. We hope to discuss it in the next session of UNEA in February, and of course the support of Portugal is very important in this issue. Another progress already made is the Basel Convention recently approved an amendment that puts plastic as a substance that, to be exported to certain countries, has to meet certain requirements. This is also important because it recognizes the problem of export of problematic plastics that create pollution elsewhere. But anyway, they create pollution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paulo. And Esther, in your opinion, where do you hope the Portuguese presidency in the area of the European climate law could do more so that it reaches the end of its mandate with a net positive outcome?
Thanks, Catarina. Well, first of all, I would really want to send all my sympathy to João Sarmento, to all the team of the presidency, because we acknowledge that it's a difficult task indeed to make us more proposals, with that many member states. But we really trust on the negotiating skills of that team to get us to really what we hope is going to be an historic high. And we will celebrate the Portuguese presidency for being able to achieve this historic high. I don't think that we can afford to have really a flop on the climate law. So as I said before, to get it right, the law must contain binding targets in line with science. But secondly, and very important also for WWF and many other civil society organizations, is that the law must put in place the rules, the systems and the checks to ensure that we deliver on our climate commitments and we stay on track to really move to a completely decarbonized society and economy. We are really talking about incremental and sustained societal change over the next decade. So really the governance, all these change is really should be one of the objectives of the law as well. And now we are really in the midst of a deadly pandemics, and our hope to beat the pandemic is the work that the scientists are doing, getting vaccines and everything. So rejecting the advice of the science now in fighting climate change, it's something that it it could be a bit surprising. And I'm going to be frank to say that we were surprised to see that the compromise proposal put forward by the presidency to set up a permanent, independent, interdisciplinary expert advisory body on climate change was watered down. In our view, such a body will really have a value of guiding, being guided by the latest scientific findings, and also provide advice then to the European Union institutions and to the Commission on how to translate these findings into very EU-specific policy making. And instead, Portugal has been proposing that the EU member states would send experts to the European Environmental Agency, the EAA, on enhancing the role of climate science. And we highly value and appreciate the role of the EAA. There's nothing against that, but we don't think that is the same thing in terms of the independence and the mandate. So this is for us, again, the second ask that is quite critical to make the climate law, as I said, a high that we hope we'll celebrate with the Portuguese. Thank you for the Portuguese presidency. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Now, João, Portugal is required to play an honest broker role during the Portuguese presidency of the Council. But you think there's still room for Portugal to push its environmental agenda, particularly the climate one, and how?
We are required to be an honest broker. This we have to say with 100% conviction, and this is what we're doing. We listen to what the Council feels about these positions. We try to interpret what the Council feels are the right solutions, and we've tried to put them down in the best possible way. We can argue if they're more progressive, less progressive. I wouldn't like to go into judgment calls on these things because where some say probably can see a conservative position, we can call it a wise one or a prudent one. So I won't go down that road. We have tried to, like I said, interpret the Council's positions, and this is what the presidency will present to the Parliament and explain in due time why we got to these conclusions. But there is still space. We're talking about the climate law, but the climate action doesn't start and finish in the climate law. We know that it's an ongoing process. We have to also bear in mind what we have done in the last few years. We are now enshrining climate neutrality in the EU into a law. We've also revised our ambition for 2030. I've heard that it is important to take into account what science has told us. We have taken into account the work that member states feel is very robust from the Commission and the proposal from the Commission on this point. We know that we will have the Fit for 55 package. Here again, we will continue to strive for ambition. And in the climate law itself, we also have to bear in mind that there's an overall objective of climate neutrality. There's a target that is being suggested for 2030, but there are other elements of ambition which we're also trying to address. Esther has mentioned one of them, the role of science, but there are others, and we're trying to find the balance that we can in the Council and coming up with the best possible solutions. We've also talked about other elements, and Chandra has very rightly pointed out to the adaptation strategy. We have, with the Parliament, strengthened language on adaptation in the climate law. We will have other elements that we have been working in our presidency, most notably on the renovation wave. So this is energy efficiency in buildings. We will have Council conclusions there. We are also working for Council conclusions on the sustainable mobility strategy that was presented very recently in December. So climate ambition is something that we have to work on in several dimensions of the EU policies. The climate law is a framework law. It's a very important law, but it doesn't end there. It's giving it the right signs. We hope it will give the right signs to align this ambition the transversal way throughout the EU policies, even when it comes to budget issues. So we just have to bear in mind that it doesn't finish with the climate law. There's other places where we have to work on as well.
Thank you, João. Angela, we are coming close to the end of this webinar with lots of great content, and I think would gladly spend a few more minutes, good minutes, talking about these topics. But unfortunately, we'll have to return to our regular day life in a bit. But Angela, straight to you. Recently, ANPWWF sent a letter together with other NGOs to the Portuguese presidency, calling for the approval of national climate change adaptation plans. Could you elaborate a bit on this, please?
I think there were many things said here, and I think the national climate change adaptation plans, we come back to the question, what kind of a real effect we want to have on the ground. So João just mentioned that the climate law is not everything. So this is an important, for us, it's an important instrument, a more detailed, more accurate instrument that can concrete in actions that can transform a general commitment on carbon neutrality in specific actions. So we think that Portugal and all the other member states, they are the ones that can know its challenges and that could know the areas that where they can support this plan. So for example, each member state should clearly identify in which dimensions that it should work to achieve this goal. It's within the forest strategy, or if it's the oceans and sustainable fisheries strategy, or is the food or agriculture. So we think that these national adaptation plans are very important. They are, they then can be monitored, and then they have to have an investment driver, an investment plan behind, which is also something important, because we cannot have concrete actions in a plan without the investment that we will need. So that's the importance of these national adaptation strategies. I think what we want, this is linked to the WWF broader vision to reverse the loss of nature and restore nature by 2030, because only when we have a detailed instrument with a detailed finance plan that then can be monitorized, we will have the perfect instrument to restore nature, to restore the nature and protect the nature that has been significantly lost in these last years. So I think that is the importance of having the national strategic adaptation plans.
Thank you, Angela. And before we move to final statements from our guests today, I'll just pick some of the questions we've been receiving from the audience. João, get ready, because a couple of them are directed towards you, and then there's also one for Paulo. João or Alexandra, I think it's up to either of you to decide who will answer. And it's regarding the emission reduction target that it's been is under discussion in the European climate law. Does the Portuguese presidency intend to move toward the Parliament's position and propose an increase of the 2030 target? Or is the Portuguese presidency ruling it out, as Frans Timmermans has signaled before? This is one of the first questions. I don't know if João or Alexandra want to answer that. And the other question is, if this is still will it be left to the last trilogue or not? And is there any potential for the Council to move towards the European Parliament position? For example, could a quid pro quo be seen from changing from a net target to an absolute emissions cut? The floor is yours, João or Alexandra.
João, please go ahead. This is more.
Thank you, Catarina. The presidency has stated very clearly in several occasions that We know where the Council's position lays, and we have been following the guidance that we have from the European Council. That guidance was sustained on the work, the technical work that was developed by the Commission to set a new target for 2030. These are the elements that we have and that the Council has used and has fueled decisions. So this is the context where we are working. To limit the discussion of the ambition on the climate law to the 2030 target, I believe is just cutting things a little short. There are other elements where we are discussing with the EP that also contribute for the ambition of this law. This is what I have to say at this point. Like I said, negotiations are ongoing. Let's see where they lead us. But it's just, we can't put the focus only on the intermediate target of 2030 in this whole process. This is what I would like to say at this point.
Thank you, João. And now a question for Paulo regarding circular economy, and I think it especially concerns the Sustainable Products Initiative, but I'll just read the question out loud. So in the instruments that you've mentioned are essentially domestic, and they appear to be mostly silent on the impacts of these measures on developing countries. And in certain cases, the European climate ambition and need to reach some targets will result in outsourcing the factors that produce more harmful effects for the environment. So we would be exporting these factors to third countries. How can we ensure that the European fulfillment of climate and environmental targets is not achieved at the expenses of an outsourcing of costs and the impacts to developing countries? Paulo.
Well, I think this mostly is achieved by the global negotiations and by putting all parts of the Paris Agreement being ambitious also, and respecting the rules. I'll give the example of the Single-Use Plastic Directive. One of the main arguments we had against the initiative from industry was that we were not the main producers of pollution, of plastic pollution. Why should we be so ambitious? And what I was saying is that if we don't clean our own house, how can we expect the others to follow suit? And we managed that because we did an ambitious directive, and a lot of countries, including those that are the most polluting countries in terms of plastic, followed, and sometimes even with more ambitious disposition than us. So this goes for all aspects of the environment. We have to involve all parts, all countries, and make them ambitious, but we have to give the example and show that it works. And normally that's what happens, because as a former vice president of the Commission said, Europe, one of the strongest points of Europe is that we are a powerhouse for regulation, meaning that we develop our laws, we develop our regulations, and then they are adapted by other countries, because we had the process of discussion that involves a lot of stakeholders, a lot of countries, and so what comes out normally is something that is workable. And that's why I think that in the climate, we also have to do this. We have to give the example, we have to show how it works, and everybody has to be ambitious like we are, and like this, there is no exports or imports of products that are worse than ours.
Thank you, Paulo, and thank you also, João, for your answers to the questions from our viewers, and who I also thank for attending this event as well. I would like to ask, before I finish, if any of the guests would like to leave final notes to add. If you would be, we're right on time. So if you could do it in 30 to 60 seconds, 1 minute tops, that would be great. I'll be happy to give the floor to any of you. Maybe I'll start in the same order. Alexandra, would you like to give some final remarks? Thank you.
Thank you, Catarina. Thank you again for inviting us. Thank you for organizing this. I also thank my fellow partners in this webinar. I think it was really interesting. And let me just finish by saying something. As the Secretary General for United Nations said, 2021 is going to be a make it or break it year. And this, I think, it's what it is, yeah? So every year we need, every year is a year that action counts. We have to be, we know we need to move fast. We know that we need to do what we need to do. So just we really need to do it. And as Paulo was saying just now, Europe has to lead by the example. And Portugal being the presidency, we are fully aware of this. I think other member states are, the Commission also. The Green Deal is our ambition for the future. So I think we have the instruments, and we just have to make it happen. And I will finish with this. And of course, we would like to do this, and we tend to do this with the civil society, and hear the civil society, which is, I think, very important. And we always try to do that as well. So thank you very much again, and happy Women's Day. I think we deserve our special day. We deserve it for the past, and looking forward to the future, we will need to be more, even more equality in society. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra, for your kind words. Paulo, I'll give the floor to you.
I agree with Alexandra that we are in a decisive period. It's a very challenging period because of everything, including COVID. But I see now things that I never saw. Real willingness from the countries, from the international institutions to do something. And I think like Europe, most of the countries will use the COVID reconstruction of the economy to make it more green and more sustainable. And this depends of course of the member states, but also of the companies, of the citizens, to try to use this problem to create a big opportunity in order to make us more sustainable and to address the challenges of climate change and environmental degradation. And also a happy Women's Day for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulo. I'll give the word to Esther now. Thank you.
Very briefly, let's not forget also about the external dimension of the European Green Deal, and how also the European Union can use its external action instruments, its development cooperation as well, to mobilize partner countries around the objectives of the European Green Deal on both climate and biodiversity. And there are some important processes happening now as we speak. And the content is as important as the process. So I would like also to thank you, the Portuguese presidency, for the openness to engage with civil society. We know that sometimes we are critical partners, we don't necessarily agree, but both in Portugal and also at European level, there's been a constant dialogue that I hope will set a standard as well for future presidencies. And thanks again to my colleagues for organizing this super timely and great event. Thank you. Obrigada.
De nada. Thank you, Esther. I'll give the word to João and then Angela. João, the floor is yours.
It's just difficult to add after what Alexandra, Paulo, and Esther have said. So I just think that from our part, please keep accounting on the most constructive process possible. We will try to bring on board different opinions. We know we will have to find a balance. We probably have to be humble enough to understand that we might not be able to solve all the problems now, and there's also a cultural development that most of us are doing, developing our positions with time, with good examples of how to integrate climate action and best practices into what we do. We have an opportunity here. It comes from an unfortunate event that's affecting people, their jobs, also their health. And let's see if we can take a valuable step forward in implementing the European Green Deal with determination and leaving no one behind. I think that's a very important message we have. So this is all a collective effort, and we have to bear that in mind, leave no one behind.
Thank you, João. Angela.
So I'm the last one. Everybody said already everything. So I would say that just in difficult times, we have to answer with ambition. But ambition, it's for me, it's not a vague concept. Ambition, it's to link with what people want. I think Europe and the politicians have to know what people want, what people are expecting and what people need. And I think this pandemic has shown to people all over Europe and all over the world that nature is really very important. It sustains our lives, and it could be the answer to a prosperous and more fair and more empathic life, I would say. So I think to reverse the loss of nature, we need to be ambitious, and that ambition should be based in what people really want from us, from all of us.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you very much, and once again to our guests for taking the time to be here, and thank you for our viewers as well. I sincerely hope that in the next opportunity we can have a new debate, but closer to each other, without Zooms. I think we're also all getting a bit tired of the screens, but it's also a good opportunity for us to connect while we cannot be together. This is the end of the first ANPWWF webinar on the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union. I would like to remind everyone that we will have 2 more webinars about the Portuguese agenda until June this year. The recording of this webinar will be available on our Facebook and YouTube page, and also on our website. And I remind everyone, if you want to keep updated with the latest news on WWF's actions, be sure to follow us and our EPO office as well on social media, and sign up for our newsletters. Thank you very much. Have a great day, and a good International Women's Day for everybody as well. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you, Catarina. Thank
Obrigada.
you all for joining.
Até a próxima.
Tchau. Tchau, Esther.
Obrigada.
Beijinho.
Yeah.
Tchau, tchau.
Thanks.